Women can't DM. The first and the last time I'll ever run a game. I used to play with a D&D group for a few months when I got the idea that I wanted to start my own one-shot campaign. I wrote one up, and it took me about a month to get all the world building complete. When I announced I wanted to run my game after our current one was wrapped, the current DM laughed at me. He said girls can't DM, that nobody would take my lead because girls aren't effective leaders. I ignored his bullshit, and after he wrapped, I set a date for next weekend. Everyone showed up, former DM included, but nobody would listen to me. I tried to establish a story, but made them talk over me about everything from ordering pizza to who should go and buy some beer in the middle of my game. After 3 hours of me trying to herd these cats, I gave up, ordered the damn pizza, and ate in quiet defeat. The DM, smug as fuck, had taken the time to tell me so, before leaving me with the rest of the game. That's when I found the truth. The former DM told the rest of the guys to not listen to me because I needed to know my place in the group and to stop trying to take over his group. I never went back, nor spoke to any of them ever again. It was called childish, but what's really childish is sabotaging a game and not talking his concerns out like a big boy. Nearly ruined my love of the game, and definitely ruined my desire to run one. Great job getting out of ROP. Honestly, that was probably for the best. They seemed like cunts. Obviously, girls can DM. I'd listen to a girl DM. Probably, maybe. Depends how good they are, really. But it doesn't seem like they were basing it off their skill level. They seemed like they were just basing it on being sexist little rat shits. Good job, OP. You did good. Experienced players being murder hobos. Group of 3 starting off on a new campaign following a prior successful one. Session starts with players having knowledge that they are to contact a named criminal residing in a city that they have never been in before. Group successfully gathers information about some shady places where this guy might be and are introduced to a ringleader in a bar who is organizing rigged games. This was the plan, and at which point everything derailed. One player decides to pull a magic stunt, and in front of all the people in the bar, steal the coins the ringleader was collecting. One heavier set person medal, the group then tags along on this, running out of the bar and giving an almost empty bag to a peddler to blame him. Cue later, when the group is looking for a place for more information about the criminal, and when they are looking, I added that there are some patrols of thugs walking about who seem to note them, which I repeat when they enter this new tavern. Group asks around and pays for information, and are booked to a hooker den room to meet a local ringleader. After entering the small room with only one exit, the ringleader pretty arrogantly arrives with 2 guards and tells them that he wants his coins back and that the stunt they pulled was dumb, but brave. He also asks how they knew the named criminal's name. Here it is where it just doesn't work out. Group simply tells them that no, they won't give him the coins back, and decides to kill him and the guards. I add him there that one of the hostess walks off in search for more guards, and that they are hearing steps approaching. Fight then starts, and after a while, when it's clear they won't win, since more guards are arriving, complaints hail down about having no RP choices, and that it was railroaded, and that the fight is unrealistic. No real attempts or roles for anything social or role-playing happening. How would you handle this? I want actions to have consequences, and I believe they were given plenty of choices for how to handle the situation. The group expects people to just agree with them no matter what they do, and they always go for cash grabbing as often as they can. In-game PvP to real-life PvP. This story is from a few years back. I was around 16 at the time, playing with a few friends from school. The DM had gone into Critical Role back during the first campaign and decided to invite us to play. We'd been playing for around 10 sessions when he suggested getting a few new players. 2 people that none of us players knew, given that they were a few years older than us. Still, we agreed and waited eagerly for next week. Enter George. This was also another person who, while weird at times, in obsession with eating fingers, is not the focus of the story. George is your typical nerd, at least the typical nerd that's portrayed by the media. Short, rather fat, a tuft of neon green hair, and some serious self-care problems. Of course, in a room of teenage boys, the smell didn't get too noticed. Some background info before we jump into the real meat of the story. We always played at the DM's house, and the only relevant PCs would be myself and George. I was playing Grebmo, the human monk of the Open Fist tradition. He was playing Grug, the Goliath barbarian. Yes, Grug. Yes, the art for his character was literally Grug's Strongjaw. No one made too much of a fuss about that, but it's certainly a bit of a red flag looking back at it now. The premise of the campaign was that we were fleeing from a giant orc horde that was sweeping across the nation, heading from town to town, warning them and fleeing so that we had the chance to amass some strength and find a solution to this problem. We ended up in a harbour town that I definitely don't remember the name of, and had a week of downtime to do what we needed to do. Other players got to creating items, making money in their own ways. I decided I would do the same thing. Grebmo made his way back to the alley brawling ring. It was quite popular for an illegal gathering, with roughly 100 people circling this amphitheater-like ring. After a discussion with an announcer, my character entered. Just as the DM was about to describe our opposing challenger, George got up from a table, walked over to the DM, whispered in his ear. After a few seconds, he sat down again, with the DM narrating that Grug was leaping into the ring, opposing my character. Okay. Signal to begin, we roll initiative. I roll higher, I'm a monk, I've got around 55 feet of base movement speed, with mobile and unarmored movement. I close a 15-foot gap between us, strike him with some open palm hits. Now I use flurry of blows. The first knocked him prone, and the next threw him 15 feet away from me. Using the remaining 40, I backed up. His turn, he got up and ran towards me. Throwing a javelin, my character caught it and threw it back. The other javelin missed. This continued for a couple turns, with him incapable of closing the gap and eventually being taken down. I will admit some fault here. I treated this like a fight. I didn't really give him much breathing room to attack back, and did my utmost here to win. But I was 16, and playing D&D primarily as a power fantasy at the time. Still, he was the one to initiate the challenge. The fight's concluded, his characters being tended to by the medics on site. They aren't clerics, nor do they have healing spells. As I left the arena, however, he narrated that his Goliath was stood on the opposing end of the alleyway. I looked at the DM for some kind of help there, given that he shouldn't even be conscious, but he decided to let it run. He attacked my character again, out of the blue. Initiative, he goes first and lands a hit. I throw out another flurry and use some dope monk shit to parkour atop the 40 feet tall roofs surrounding the alley. He uses all of his movement and actions to follow me up, and well, I punch him off the roof. He falls and is taken out by the full damage. I should mention that since defeating him for the first time, he's been staring at me from across the table with clear anger. He tried to kick me a few times, but I'd just give him an odd look, and he'd stop. Some mean vitriol, I don't know how to pronounce that word, was spit, in how that I was probably cheating and using a broken class. Yes, so broken to punch people. The orc horde arrives. Our DM wasn't the most experienced, but he seemed to want to use the horde as a reason for us to get a move on and stop fighting. I prepare to go help the Goliath up, but he narrates that his character does so himself and runs away. Directly into orc horde, George narrates. Grug takes out 30 or so of them before he eventually goes down. Finally, the DM shuts him down and says he could perhaps manage one or two before being swarmed and killed. Our characters all flee to the boat we'd prepared. George, however, gets up from a table and barges me to leave the room, heading for the printer. He's getting a new character sheet about 90 minutes into the session. As soon as he returns, he gets the scrolling details down, not consulting the DM or anyone in regards to what he was doing. In silence, he prepared for his final hurrah. What the fuck is he planning on doing? Who knows? Probably gonna try and counter the monk. We continued playing for around 90 minutes, took a rest, fought a sea monster, took another rest, simple RP, scenic descriptions, and the like. Once that time had passed, we were still out on the open sea, and George had prepared his new character. I wish I had some real recollection of what it was, but this is all I know. He was a dwarf paladin with +2 plate armor that he gave himself and a shield. I don't remember his weapon. I'd remembered more if not for the fact that this character lasted all of 10 minutes. George butts in at some RP interval and tells us that his character is climbing onto a boat. We're a fair few miles from any kind of landmass, but again, the DM didn't question it. He was very much along for the ride. The original party, myself included, exchanged some very concerned glances about our new player. It only got worse when he started role-playing. He attempted to commandeer the boat. He told us that he was an experienced adventurer and that he could handle that all could. If he took him back to land, that would have been fine enough if he didn't immediately segue into death threats, announcing he'd wipe us all out if he didn't swear fealty and allow him to lead our ragtag group. What the fuck is he on about? The party agrees that we're going to fight him. Initiative is rolled, he makes a beeline for my character and throws out 2 attacks. I'm happy we all had to play his role publicly since I'm fairly sure I would have taken 2 natural 20s there instead. He rolled a 5 and a 13 before modifiers. It's weird the little details you remember, though I have told this story a few times over the years in person, so maybe this was just cemented. With the ladder hitting Divine Smite, you know the deal. Another player takes his turn before mine and just bonks the guy. Playing a fighter himself. My turn. We were fairly near the edge of the boat. Yep. I punched him off. I used both flurries to do so, given that he resisted the first attempt. I think he pretty fairly deserves that, honestly. He gets punched off a roof, gets punched into the water. Get fucked. The DM announces that combat is over as his character is incapable of swimming in plate armor. His third loss in one session. Each fight a product of his own creation. That's when things took a turn. Like I mentioned earlier, George is not an athletic person. However, he tries to throw himself over the table and ends up crawling his way over, swinging fists and even trying to bite me. I'm not exactly Superman, but I'm 6 foot, even and average in build, so I didn't struggle much with him. The other players sought to separate us after a couple of hits had been thrown. He continued to grumble and shout obscenities, telling me that I wasn't welcome next week. As one might expect, I continued to attend. George didn't, however. That would be his last game with us, but not the end of his story.